Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Parentoni. I am the interim co-head of performing arts at the Wexner Center, and we are delighted to welcome you all to Mershon Auditorium tonight for Calling Hours. We would like to extend our gratitude to the Ohio State University Office of Academic Affairs and the Ohio State Sustainability Institute for their generous support of this project. And as always, we'd like to thank the Doris Duke Foundation for making performing arts programs like this at the Wexner Center possible. We are so grateful for our members that are attending tonight. For those that are not a part of our membership program, please consider joining. Your support will give you special benefits while helping give others access to multidisciplinary arts experiences. After the show this evening, we encourage you to stay seated for a brief post-show talkback before adjourning to the lobby for food and drinks. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I am standing here as a dad and a trucker. My dad was a trucker. I have two sons who were both truckers. We truckers were around when you were born on the Conesville River bottom. We've been watching you since you were young and growing, which makes us, I guess, sort of a dad to you. I think that's why I've been asked to talk about your history. From the start, you were a hub, connecting this little rural part of Ohio to the world. You were a hub, and we truckers were your grapevine. They said at the time there was a trucker on every corner. We came in and out, brought you things, took things away. We watched, talked, while we waited, sometimes in long lines to load and unload. We had a bird's eye view of what was happening. When you came on the scene, it wasn't you by yourself in the river bottoms. It was you with a huge 5,000-acre reserves, and the company owned all of it. They owned the reserves, they owned the coal, they owned the transmission lines, and of course, they owned you. Everything. If you go to the ODNR website and look up AEP coal lands or any of the surrounding reserves, those were all surface and deep mines. It took a lot of coal to keep you fed. 100 tons every 8 minutes. I'd like to read you this short list of things that you needed. Number one, coal, obviously. We truckers brought you coal, but not so much until the 80s. Most of your coal came by conveyor, at first from as far out as Otsego and Plainfield. Two, a load of limestone for your first shed, and so much more limestone after that. Materials to mix concrete on site. For the times the job was just too big to haul ready mixed trucks by truck, we brought that in. Four, parts for your parts. For over 6 months, we were trucking parts in for the Coal Chief and the Broken Arrow drag line. Huge, digging, swinging, dumping machines to feed the hungry you. Five, so many funny small things. Once I borrowed my boss's Cadillac to go to Cleveland to pick up 4 custom bolts. And once, I don't remember what you needed, but all I remember was saying, hell, I'll just take my motorcycle. 6, overload illegal loads. Like a 43,000-pound blower hauled from Charleston, West Virginia during a snowstorm. It wouldn't balance on the flatbed without being cantilevered out way to the one side, but it still needed to be installed by 6 a.m. Forget on which unit. It wasn't the best situation, but it had to be done, so we done it. 7th, sometimes you just needed us to move things around the plant. When it got really cold, we'd spend the night hauling frozen coal from hoppers to crusher so it could be blown into the burners. It was a good winter job with lots of hard shoveling. Folks mistakenly think truckers are sitters. It's not only miners who get black lung from the coal dust. a list of things you didn't need. 1, a field of corn that needed to be harvested so they could break ground. It was too wet to bring in any equipment, so my dad helped the farmer husk the corn by hand. 2, a massive amount of logs. When the Tri-Valley Reserves was cleared for mining, the largest timber harvest east of the Mississippi, logs to the mills, wood chips to the paper mills. There were 3 paper mills in Coshocton. 3, fiberglass debris from a collapsed water tower. I felt the particles in my throat and my lungs. So I put the white chemical suit on and respirator on, and you had to know how to protect yourself back then. Which reminds me of the 4th item, fly ash. We hauled and piled it up against 2 high walls. They leaked toxic runoff, but the base from the one neutralized the acid from the other. So I guess it worked. 5, we hauled a mountain of coal ash to the dump off of State Route 83. We watched them put in a PVC liner under the whole darn thing. The PVC came in big rolls like carpet, and 2 women sweated for days, soaked through, to seal it. And we were hauling out again your old ponds, making a second mountain behind the first. Which brings me to my last list. The people we saw, the people we knew. All the contractors and project managers, many of them coming out of state to build you. All the people that hung off you like spiders, keeping you going, putting lights up, or like the Hungarian team from New Jersey, painting your conveyors. The guys that came in with the probes hanging off their trucks, we called them the Beverly Hillbillies. They were in charge of testing emissions every 6 months until the automatic monitors were installed on your stacks, which sampled every 6 seconds. Crazy number of 600 employees. When all 6 units were running, 600. Until units 1 and 2, then 5 and 6 shut down, and the numbers began dropping. Started feeling a little personal when the yardbirds we saw every day got forced out. This guy pushed to early retirement, then that guy, until it was down to a skeleton crew. We brought in fewer trucks, less coal, less limestone for the scrubbers. Ever since the number 4 stack went up, I wondered what things looked like from up there on top. At the end of the day, a buddy of mine who worked in the plant asked if he could take me up. His boss was like, yeah, whatever, we're shutting down, what do we care? Now, I know this community from down here, but once I got up there, it all looked flat. High walls, hills, valley, everything just looked flat. And that was it. Well, we're more like undertakers now. As we haul things out, we watch a team pick you apart like third world scavengers. Wherever they're from, they must not have much of a life at home. As we haul things out, we talk forever your grapevine, though we can't say you're much of a hub anymore. May you rest in peace.
Like so many of us, I spent my entire career at the plant. I started on the floor and worked my way up into management. No matter where I was working, and I worked all around, no matter what I was doing, there wasn't a day that I walked into the heat and noise that it didn't feel right. With all this experience under my belt, there aren't many first times anymore. But here I am standing, first time, in front of you, ready to deliver a eulogy. I thought I'd start out with this quote by Henry Ford. It's the same way Ford's eulogy started. Here it is. There's too much to do in a day to spend minutes of it in the futility of grief. I thought this quote goes well with what I want to talk about, which is not grief, but the great work of the plant. At our peak, we put out 2,000 megawatts. That's a lot. That's electricity for 2 million homes. That's more than twice the size of Columbus. That's a fifth or a sixth the size of Ohio. That's a lot of lights. Laundry machines running. Houses heated and cooled. And now, in these days, a lot of devices charged. I'm not sure the layperson understands much about the process or much about the product. You can't see it. You can't store it. It's hardly a thing. These electrons flowing through the wires, being constantly distributed over a volatile marketplace. All the perfections and complex processes. 35,000 gallons of water per minute, made purer than pure. Insanely precise pressures, temperatures, and volumes. Adjustments to accommodate the percent of carbon to silica to aluminum to clay in a particular load of coal. Measurement. Lots and lots of exact measurement. Waste management, margins, watchfulness. So much effort. All you had to do was to look at the miles and miles of tubing carrying water and steam and oxygen through the plant to appreciate the miles and miles of potential leaks and breaks. That alone was enough to make what we did feel like magic. In supercritical unit 4, steam was compressed to such a degree that it behaved like a liquid. It was gas, a vapor, but it acted like a liquid. Wrap your mind around that magic. Every day, in the face of danger, we worked together to make this magical stuff. We didn't ask why or what for. We were making something people need. There was pride in the monumental power and importance of it all. So much pride in this rural workforce led by managers who had vision. I'd say this vision thing happened big time right after a nasty strike. When AEP bought the plant and Dan Lambert came on board, we started having all these meetings, not just about equipment and stuff, but about our people. If we were going to grow, We needed people prepared to work together using new strategies and more sophisticated science. Dan Lambert saw the link between good community relations and good labor relations. He was crucial in adopting the elementary school across the river. Employees from every level got involved over there with parents, kids, teachers. We did it right. When our environmental people gave tours to the kids, they just weren't explaining. They were sharing and excited about it. We sent a team to Washington, D.C. to present our Adopt a School program. A fourth grade kid built a computer from start to finish while the adults explained to a congressional committee how our partnership worked. We received some significant recognition for that. But even better, we made a name for ourselves every day. It might sound naive and overly proud, but this is how industry and labor and management and community are supposed to work. Not to leave government out of the equation, though, because we did get significant government dollars through grants. We all pushed the boundaries together, and there was creativity. We'd get a directive from up above, and we'd say, well, how do they expect us to do that? But then slowly but surely, working together, we would figure it out. We could have just rolled over, of course, and said, nothing we can do. But we always kept going. Corporate said that we were like survivors on the deck of a burning ship. This particular story sticks out. Ryan Forbes, a young guy at the time, came up with a method to pipe limestone slurry from Unit 4 to Units 5 and 6, which were still using expensive processed lime from Kentucky. It was risky, really risky. Nothing like it had ever been done before. Corporate said, no, don't do it. Corporate thought the plant was theirs. It wasn't. It was ours. They received the revenue, but the plant was ours. So we looked at what we had to lose and what we had to gain, and we decided to put $1 million of our own operating budget towards adapting the system that Ryan said. You can't imagine the triumph we felt when it worked. We ended up saving $6 to $8 million a year online. We made a name for ourselves. When we closed, an executive vice president said, you guys probably extended the plant life at least 5 years, if not more. The Chinese used to come, not to see how we made electricity, but to see how we protected our environment. It's something they're trying to figure out. We talked through translators. And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought we had problems. Our plant was a model for AEP. But in the end, There was just too much stacked up against us. I tell young people, you're living in a pristine environment in this US of A. You just don't know it. The United States is going the clean route. Maybe we're going to be extinct, but the planet is going to be fine.
Back in the 70s, my dad made today what would be $250,000 operating equipment in the mines. He made a lot of money, but by the time he was 55, his back and legs were trashed from the constant climbing and lifting, and he had to retire. He didn't want that for me. He wanted me to have an education. I'm an educator, and I don't make near the money that he made. If the truckers were like dads in all of this, you can think of Riverview School District as your child. We graduated our first senior class 8 years after your first unit went online. Now, this was before my time, and not everything was perfect. Dick and Jane readers were still being used. The old schools were heated with coal. You hear stories about mornings when the halls would be so full of smoke that you couldn't see. But we fixed that. We fixed so much over the years. It's been a source of pride how much we've maintained these old buildings. We've always been Black Bear proud. And because you provided, we could provide. We were proud of what we could provide. When our teachers and administrators asked for books, they got books. And when they wanted to go on field trips, we sent them. We were able to hire full-time support staff and give them benefits. We provided stability and community led by our anchor families. People wanted to be part of the Riverview School District. You know, if I were going to give advice to the Harrison Centrals of the world, newly flush with fracking dollars and new state-of-the-art athletic facilities, all-turf track and fields, baseball, football, softball, the best of the best, I'd say, if you have the ability to invest in the future, put your plan in place so that you can give back to the coming generations and not end up right back where you used to be in spite of all the coal that came out of your hills. In the 60s and 70s, they were heady times in Coshocton County. Riverview High School was built for 1,000 students in anticipation of an expanding student body. Manufacturing was growing, and we were building a strong blue-collar community. In 1980, we built a junior high from cash we had in reserve. Now, when you build a state-of-the-art school with cash, the taxpayer gets a distorted view of public education funding. Just take a look at our history of passing levies and look no further. In the 60 years since, everything has switched. Everything's reversed, and now you've got a local school district that is struggling. The elementary school in Conesville is closing. So is the one in Keene. Union and Pleasant Valley and Roscoe are already closed. We're shrinking, we're contracting, and we feel it. You're gone. I remember attending a community meeting. Dan Lambert, your plant manager, was there. And hearing from teachers at that meeting about how hard it was to keep students engaged in science, Dan pulled management and labor together back at the plant and said, let's adopt Conesville Elementary. We can give them the science that they need. This was a game changer. Classes visited the plant, guys from the plant visited the school, and together with parents and teachers, they cleaned out a storage room and installed a science center. They secured grants together, and the state noticed. Governor Taft's wife visited the school. Once, AEP employees drove equipment across the river to help plant 50 trees that the school had won in a competition, and 48 of those trees are still living today. I love that. We were all proud. Kids felt important. You were a great partner in education. And I remember something else from that meeting, maybe something even more important to us tonight than anything else. Dan Lambert talked about the future. The world we work in, he said, everything is changing. We have to adapt. We have to learn to live with that change. And I think of it like making a movie that's got its particular challenges. You ask, what are the challenges? Who do we need to meet those challenges? And then you assemble the best team possible. Actors, film crew, composers, set designers. And after a lot of hard work, you have a movie with a long list of credits. And then everybody resets, takes a new part, and gets into a new configuration to make the next movie. What does pulling together in the face of change look like for us? What does growth and stability look like? What does Coshocton County look like if every high school graduate and every alum with a certificate or college degree could get a good job offer right here in the county? Well, like all of us who understand our parents are mortal, we knew your life would end one day. But what human being is not taken by surprise when death becomes real? It's been hard. Tonight, as we mourn the loss of AEP Conesville, Conesville Elementary, and Keene Elementary, let's also celebrate. In the face of our current challenges, let's celebrate our potential to build new teams of teachers with parents and a committed community all working together in support of each other, and most importantly, in support of our children. This is our time to pull together in a new configuration. We are and remain Black Bear proud.
My people came here from Steubenville area. There's a Coke plant across the river at Flonabes, West Virginia. I had relatives there for a long time. And when I visited, it didn't matter if it was in the winter, summer, or spring, I'd smell that Coke burning. And for the longest time, I always thought that was the most miserable stench ever. But the old timers, they would say, there will come a time when you'll appreciate that smell. Because it meant jobs. It meant industry. It meant a vibrant community. I bring it up because your stacks meant jobs, high-wage jobs. We all were thinking of the employees the day you shut down. Your stacks also meant home. You could be up to 30 or 40 miles away at certain points when you saw those stacks. Even my 3-year-old great-grandson, when he'd see your stacks, he's like, oh, that's home. Oh, that strikes close. I think that's what we're all looking forward to these days, getting home. We knew where we were when we saw your stacks. The world knew where we were when they saw your stacks. Conesville Power Plant, Ohio Power Company. Conesville Power Plant, Columbus Southern Ohio Electric Company. Conesville Power Plant, AEP. It feels good and important to name you, neighbor. You were huge. At the end of the day, you were the lifeblood of our community, or a big piece of it. Maybe we complained some. When you started up, we couldn't hang laundry without coal ash, brown marks, and little holes in the sheets. The company hung buckets in town to collect ash. Data, they called it. It seems pretty darn primitive. It's hard to wrap your head around all the changes that happened during your lifetime. You'd think at this point we'd be adjusting to this constant pace of change. But we're stuck in a mindset where we don't like change, not even the slightest bit. It gets resistance. We're not good at changing things up and going in a different direction. You have to laugh at people's reactions when they learn that what it was going to cost them to have their trash picked up. Once they found out that the township didn't get tax revenue from you anymore. Ask anybody outside the township. They all kind of hinted at, we got a bit spoiled here. We hated to see you leave. Even with the things that kept us up, the night coal trains coming through. If you lost a unit and the safety was lifted, you'd wake up the whole village. That sound was something to hear. We strained to hear the names when people were paged over your PA system in the middle of the night. It felt uneasy, like we were being called to the principal's office. In Conesville, the cornfields come right up to the edge of our streets like walls. Farmers, they still look to where your stacks were to see which way the wind is blowing. You were a weather station. You were also a clock. We knew what time of day it was just by the sounds. Some things we could hear all hours. The conveyor belt going, the dozers clinking. It was crazy. Even up at Wills Creek, you'd be fishing or on the kayak down by the dam or in the woods up in the hills. And you'd still hear all those noises. Now, you don't hear any. And there's the dark. I used to tell people who come to visit overnight, look out, see all those lights? That's our mall. Well, malls aren't much of a thing anymore. But like a mall, you brought people to town. Floods of people during shutdown. Forget getting into Conesville store during shutdown. There'd be a long wait. I sat on my patio and I watched stack number 4 go up in a continuous pour over 24 hours. And I sat on my patio and watched the stacks come crashing down. You should have felt the ground. The dust was unbelievable. Little bits of sand that came right through the screen. I guarantee that anybody living in Conesville still has black coating of soot in their attic, and who knows what it meant breathing all that over the years. There are people who wish the company had bought up all of our houses for 3.5 times their value, like they did in Cheshire down along the river. There was a lot of cancer there. I don't know. I'm not medical. I'm not going to go down that path. I don't know. But in 2019, the kids had to stop drinking water at the school for a while because of mercury. Seems like you're hearing a lot about mercury and the EPA and how they had to do a lot with the end. Even though you were outside the limits, we thought of you as inside the village. You were a good neighbor, and not just because of township taxes you paid or the 50-50 split of chip and seal on our roads, but also the little things, caring things, like somebody from the plant that dressed up as a light bulb handed out candy apples for trick-or-treat. Or how you bust in 1,000 kids for Community Earth Day. Maybe nothing shows it is better than how on your way out, you left us a $60,000 community school playground. And it wasn't just the corporation making a show. Folks in the plant, they would pass the hat and help each other and in the community. A couple years ago, as things were shutting down, your CFO and some other officers sat down with the township trustees and said, "This is how it is. We're going to be leaving, and you need to be thinking ahead. You need to prepare." And we did. We tried. But it was still devastating. Your departure has had a devastating effect on the community. If there was anything we could have done differently, I don't know. Now, we're in transition, but what are we transitioning to? BuzzFeed sent a photographer to Coshocton County to do a story about the decline of Appalachia. He takes this shot of a guy drinking a beer on the porch without a shirt on, and his porch is falling apart. And there's a little kid without any clothes on, standing there. He didn't capture what we're about, just the absolute worst things about us. Oh, poor us. We're Appalachian. That's not us. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and some of it's intentional. Right now, the demolition is a part of progression. When the stacks came down, a door closed, and when one door closes, another door opens.
Our plant closed in 2020. Was that in spring? Yes, at the same time as the pandemic. It was hard for me to even separate what we went through because both things were huge. It was hard to put things into perspective because it was COVID-19 on top of everything, right? It was barely survivable.
Well, the last day was supposed to be May 30th, but COVID moved the date up, and I got to tell you, that was hard. Not just for those who were sent home that day, but for those already gone. Because it was your livelihood, you know? It was your life. It's what you did every day.
This eulogy is for the loss of our brothers and sisters, for what we gave each other.
Well, when the stacks came down, there were those standing there that it really meant something to. And then there were people there just for the spectacle. This eulogy is not for you if you're here for a spectacle. It's not for the hobnobbers who might give a bunch of words but haven't been affected, like the people that have lost their jobs, got divorced, whose whole world changed, those who really got hit hard.
If you care, this eulogy is for you. This performance is for you.
But mostly it's for the hundreds of us that work together to keep the lights on and the energy flowing at the Conesville coal-fired power plant.
Yes. Brotherhood was a big part of it. I think it's been the hardest thing for me to transform from. We're all friends, close-knit. We hung out together, raised our kids together, went to ball games together, went to Christmas parties together. You know, we did everything together.
I talk to people at the job where I work now, but you're talking to them about business. It's all business. It's not come in first thing in the morning, have a cup of coffee, bullshitting about your kids did last night or what your plans were for the weekend. There was a really nice communal aspect to the plant that I don't have anymore. What passes as conversation now is me trying to keep up with these people I work with. It's been a very, very lonely transition.
Now, working at the power plant was a good time. I mean, mostly we had that nose to the grindstone, hard-working, you know, almost competition kind of thing to see if you could work more hours in a week than the guy next to you. Well, when you step back, it was insanity because we deprived ourselves of our own free time. I mean, we put it in our head that not only is this normal, but I'm doing really good by doing 80 hours this week. You know, I'm killing it. Well, not just a few people lost their families that way, ended up divorced because they were working all the time.
I stayed married, but I admit there were times that I turned into a real jerk. When you're tired, bad stuff comes out. You say wrong stuff and you offend people.
Talk would get pretty rough in the plant. We tore each other up. The first time I joined my regional traveling group, everybody was yelling. I just put my head down and said, okay. It was rough, but you learn to give it back. That's how it gets. There was a bit of a show about it. You had to sharpen your wits and get good at timing.
Yeah, well, but we loved each other like brothers. I mean, that's how it is when you work together 12 hours a day. Well, hardly a woman on the floor. It was probably hell for the women that were there. They had to work 2-3 times as hard just to prove themselves. I'm sure they knew they were shaking up the fraternity. Kind of makes me feel bad thinking back on it.
We trusted each other with our lives because there was bad stuff that could happen. 2 guys I know were killed. People were injured. We got better in latter years, but it was typical in the industry.
Well, you get complacent around all this equipment because you're so used to it that you're walking by stuff that, you know, if something goes wrong, you'd be a dead man.
Being your brother keeper was an assignment.
It was kind of like the military in a way. You had to follow all these procedures that slow you down on purpose, so you wouldn't wreck things or people in your effort to solve a problem.
Your life's on the line. They pay you well because your life is on the line.
Yeah, well, for a while they paid incentive money if your team didn't have a safety incident.
Of course, you bury some stuff.
Be a sport, don't report.
Yeah, well, they didn't truly want to hear it anyways. I wanted to go to Columbus and let the CEO know that what they read, what actually happened, were 2 different things.
We're all human. We're all fallible.
You know, I carry sort of a permanent map of burns on my body. I can tell you where in the plant I got each of them. You know, structure after structure falls to the demolition. My memory starts to go. I'm worried there'll be a time when I don't remember the exact locations anymore.
It's funny. Last night I made a list of all the names I could remember. I could name you over 200 guys. There's so many more. I can remember faces, but I just wish I could remember the names.
Facebook memory page is full of obituaries.
Yeah. I used to only know of one person that had brain cancer. Now I know 9 or 10. You know, your tooth enamel contains kind of a chemical record of the climate and conditions you grew up in. Well, when they dig us up and look at our teeth, you think they'll notice we work together?
We breathed in more flue gas than you'd care to know. Way more than anyone on the outside was ever exposed to. And here we are. Says something, doesn't it?
Sure does.
We try to make it better. So many changes we went over the years at the plant. We're burning cleaner and cleaner.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure coal has that big of impact on the environment. I could argue that back and forth, left and right.
The units were old. They weren't designed to hit all those clean goals.
I find it difficult for the United States to clean up its act when other countries keep burning coal. Somehow or other, with the earth turning, with the air moving, I think we're probably breathing the air, the polluted air that one time over China.
Yeah.
We're pro-fossil fuel energy people, pro-coal, pro-gas, coal. Not so much out of choice, but where's our pro-basketball team to stimulate our economy? You know, where's our chip plant? I don't feel like our hardship has really been taken into serious consideration. Coal was an opportunity, so we took advantage of it, just like anybody else would have. That made the economy run, ours, yours. When I started there were over 600 people employed at Conesville Station. When units 1 and 2 shut down 40 years later, we got down to 250. Lots of people went then. It was terrible. Made you have sleepless nights. I had 2 teenage children. Made me think, what are my kids gonna do? It scared the crap out of me. Those were the lean years. Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. We saw it as lean the people out at the bottom. Not a good yin strategy. But everybody pulled together to make it work with less people. We kept doing it with less and less, but it wasn't good enough.
And there were the guys who agreed to go on the road to save their jobs. It saves your job, but it kills your family, unless you're dragging everyone with you in the camper.
That might kill your family.
A lot of people would say, oh, well, these guys can get jobs anywhere. They can go someplace else. I didn't want to do that. I liked this region and didn't want to move out of it.
It was a way to run a company, but it's not a way to treat people.
Always in the back of my head was the fact that I was working for this dying thing that had just a couple more months to live. Coal prices and natural gas prices had a lot to do with it, if you ask me.
People say there's jobs here, but they're not the same kind of jobs. The good jobs are few, and it's hard to get one. And the people aren't the same.
Not long after the plant closed, me and my boss talked about how we missed it already. I said, it's kind of like a high what we did. And he was like, it is a high. It's unlike anything you'll ever do in your life. And you trying to explain that to people outside, I'm not sure most of them can grasp what we mean. I think about that a lot, still being young. Will I ever find something equal to this?
Well, something's going to happen good out of this, provided people want to see good out of it. I suggest we have something where we can go and talk. Just talk and be together. Even if it's just a couple hours, even if it's just a few guys. For a lot of us, I think that would go a long way towards helping us move forward. Brothers. Brothers.
years after the last electricity was generated and transmitted from AEP Conesville, we meet here in this place for a moment. We meet here in a moment of fellowship to speak and listen and witness that we are not alone, but part of a common world of feeling. Those who have spoken before me have so eloquently given shape to the life of the plant, its history, the great work done, and what it meant to the community. I hope to borrow from William Shakespeare to give our sorrow words. It's been 3 years since they blew the steam off Unit 4 for the last time. Unlike shutting down for maintenance, this final release was like a last breath, a death rattle that let us all know it was done, only quiet and dark. Such a strange feeling then, this giant sitting there in the pitch dark. This loss is not Coshocton's first. Before AEP Conesville, there was West Rock. Before that, Novelty. Before that, Pretty Products, Steel Ceilings, Ansel Edmont, Shaw Barton, JII, GE. All closed. Workers dispersed. Empty pockets. Upheaval. But all these deaths do not make this one any easier. To say that there's been deaths before doesn't lessen the grief here. People say things like, it'll hurt less over time. You gotta move on. But those words do not reach our hearts. And we need words that reach our hearts. The grief that does not speak knits up the o'erwrought heart and bids it break. Thank you, Shakespeare. We're grieving. A big part of our world has ended. Everything has shifted. It's not just that we're resistant to change, that we're inflexible. It ends up that it's just plain hard to imagine how things can possibly go on without your team. That the future can occur without you on the job. My grandmother once said, "Don't throw away knowledge. The rule book was written in blood, and you gotta think about that. About all that stuff that was learned. Things change," she would say. Technologies change. Opportunities change. Communities change. The basics don't. Well, my question to you is, what are the basics? What are the basics we learned during the life of the plant? What is it that we need to be remembering about our lives with AEP Conesville? Memory and the ability to imagine the future sit in the same place in our brains. It's a brain thing, a human electrical system thing. We cannot separate one from the other. Imagining the future is a form of memory. That's the title of an article I read, but it pertains here this evening. So I'm asking you, what is it that we should be remembering so that we can be imagining our future? I believe that we have heard some answers right here tonight. Let's remember that once there was a place where the blessed found themselves as useful members of a community, a state, a nation, their sacrifices validated by good wages. Let's remember how great it felt to work in a place that called on all parts of you, where you not only worked hard physically, but where you had to think and problem solve and to work together as a team. Let's remember the visionary leadership and imagine future leaders who will mobilize us in all of our imperfections and help us to make the impossible possible. Memory and future together. Is this not what we want to take with us as a community? The knowledge that when we are faced with the impossible, when we're faced with our mortality and imperfections, we should say yes. Throughout the history of the plant, from the coal ash falling on clotheslines to its most efficient and cleanest iteration, nobody said it would be better to stay dirty. It would be better to keep sending microns of mercury into the atmosphere. Nobody said, why shouldn't we be taking care of the environment? They said yes, until the old system couldn't be tweaked anymore. Let's remember, they said yes. Memory and the ability to imagine the future together. Let us say yes. We can do this. Thank you all for your service. Amen.
Conesville is a really quiet town, not a lot of drama. It was a big event when the stacks came down. I guess I knew the stacks were coming down. We had been told, but I thought it would be in the afternoon, at least noon or 11, when I'd be more awake. It was the weekend. I thought they'd wait until we were out of bed, but they didn't. We live in an older two-story home on the main stretch in the center of Conesville. When the stacks started falling, it felt like our foundation was going in. I guess that's what woke me up. It felt like they were blowing up the house and we were going down with the stacks. I really thought the house was falling in. The electricity went off for a moment and my dog was panicking. I went downstairs holding onto the railing. The dog stuck close, not bounding down the steps as usual. The house was still intact, obviously, because I was walking downstairs, but you know what I mean. It was crazy. In the den, my father was up and jumping from window to window. He was trying to get a good view of what was going on. He's a taller man, so it was strange seeing him standing on the couch, holding the curtain back with one hand. Then he leaped to the other couch, back and forth, like a dog or kid waiting for the UPS man or something. There was a coffee cup on the table, so he must have been up having his coffee, waiting for the stacks to come down. You could walk out on our front porch and get a good view of the stacks, so I opened the front door. I had to rub my eyes. It was a shock. that, they were gone. You couldn't see the stacks anymore. It was, well, scary.
Our tree fell down, and I saw deers run across the road. The mom deer looked pregnant. The dad deer was pushing her to get away from the stacks. They were running across the field to get away to save their lives. The tiniest deer was running the fastest. My heart was pounding, and my mom was scared. She said a bad word. She almost never says bad words.
My mom got scared when the air pushed into the house. Our windows almost shattered because there was a big wave that hit our house, a big air. We could feel the air on our bodies and little rocks hitting you like tiny little pellets.
The only thing blocking me was a little hill, the train tracks, and a bridge. The smoke came into our house and I started coughing. We had the windows open. It faded away in a few seconds.
I was at my grandparents' house on the roof, and there was this huge boom. My eyes got really big. It scared my sister so much she started crying and went downstairs and covered herself with a blanket.
The last stack didn't go where they wanted it to go. A big metal ring flew off the top into the field.
Do you think it could have rolled into the village?
I thought the stack could have fallen on the village.
I thought they were going to go straight down.
A siren blared before they were counting down. They yelled it, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Afterwards, we went to the field. Stacks were just laying there, hardly anything left of them. It looked like a disaster. Oh, we saw the ring.
My dad worked at the stacks. He climbed inside and cleaned them with a hammer to get the ashes out. He almost fell once and could have died. I'm happy that they're down.
My uncle blew them up.
It sounded like a crash and a tornado mixed.
It sounded like a ginormous stick snap while an earthquake was happening.
It sounded like a giant elephant, like a stampede of elephants.
It felt like huge trees just falling everywhere.
Hundreds and hundreds of dynamites blowing things up.
Loud as a nuclear bomb going off.
They put bombs in the stacks. My grandpa helped build them. He was a boss. He didn't watch them come down. He was at his farm. His cow just had a baby.
My grandpa was just back from surgery on his heart on crutches.
Our neighbor worked there. He lost his job. Nobody from their house came to watch. They stayed inside. He's a drunk.
You can't say that.
I was wrapped in a blanket inside my house.
My dad lost his job. He didn't work at the plant, but his work closed.
I was at the car eating donuts. People were lined up on the highway.
My dad said we saw a piece of history.
Everyone, my brother, my mom, grandma and grandpa, was recording with their phones. I've watched the videos a lot.
I was in the car with my mom and my dog. I thought my life was gonna end, so I started eating as many donuts as I could, inhaling donuts like it was my last meal. And we hit a bump at the car at the same time. The car was vibrating, and I started choking, and the dog wouldn't stop growling. My mom was scared, and I took off really fast, and then slammed on the brakes, and I hit my head on the seat. I was knocked out cold and had to stay in the hospital for 2 days with a giant bandage around my head.
I thought they would come down in little pieces, but they came down all at once and collapsed. I told my mom it was like the Twin Towers coming down. I've read a book about that.
Only the little ones stayed up. We still don't know what they're going to do with those. Do you know?
They took the big ones down to keep planes from crashing into them. Plus, empty buildings make good places for people to hide from the cops.
Now that they're down, I don't know when I'm close to my house.
We went by a couple days later. Trucks were in there cleaning all the stuff out. There were excavators. My sister loves excavators.
What if they turned the whole entire field into a park? It'd be fun if we had more parks close by. Make a fountain in the middle, and trees, and a stone gate opening, and benches around the fountain. Or maybe a dog park.
The main reason they took everything down was because of COVID.
My dad says it's because Obama said something about the smokestacks and how we should just have solar power and stuff. But what happens if there's no sun one day and a city or town doesn't have any power? That's what I'm wondering. What happens then?
I'm pretty sure they're taking things down to build something new.
Well, people aren't talking about it anymore, really.